In this video, we'll take a look at the cash flow forecasting within Business Central and the different types of cash flows we can do. So I'm logged in here with the Accountant Role Center, and we can see on our Role Center here we have the cash flow forecast. I'm currently looking at changing cash. I can change this over a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis if I need to. Or I could look at the accumulated cash and see the cash position again over a daily, weekly basis in here. I can also edit my manual reserves and expenses. So ordinarily I'd be wrapping up things like customers and suppliers, anything that's already in the ledgers, but things that aren't yet in there that I know are going to recur, I can place manual expenses and manual revenues in here and decide on their recurrence as well, and those will be wrapped up into the cash flow. And I can also recalculate my cash flow from here as well. Okay, I can also print out my cash flow report up here. If I come to cash flow date list, and that will then report out again based on whatever periods I want to look at, based on whatever intervals I want to look at. So I'm looking at 8 intervals of 1 week lengths in here. Pick which forecast I'm looking at. I can create as many forecasts as I need. We'll take a look at that in a second, and I can send that to Excel or preview in here too. So there I go, across my weekly periods, my starting liquidity, my receivables based on when my sales orders are coming in as well. If I've added in fixed assets, service orders, or I've got jobs in there, I want to add general ledger budgets in there as well. It's all based on my setup, and we'll take a look at the setup in a little while. So it's not just sort of the cash flow forecast as well. Over in my accounting schedules, I can also have my cash flow statement in here as well, just like in my balance sheet and my profit and loss statements. I can layer those out too, and I can see that based on whatever period I'm looking at. And just like the balance sheet and profit and loss layouts, I can determine what these rows are, what information they contain, and also what more columns are that I'm looking across here. So that's all of the results. So how do we get to those positions? So working backwards, if I come into my cash management here and come into my cash flow forecasts, as I mentioned, I can create as many of these as I wish. But if I go in and open up this individual one, I can determine how this is built, what periods we're looking at, and here we have the build up of the information in here. So I can go into receivables and see what receivables we have within here, what those have been predicted out as. Again, we'll see in a second how these are built up. Or I can come into the cash flow forecast itself, navigate off, and see the individual entries that go in to make up the forecast. So that's been built through. So that was from my suggestion of entries and registration, which you'll see how that's done. Or I can navigate in and look at my cash flow availability by periods as well. So again, I can narrow these down, look at individual periods as well, or just view it as a balance of a particular date. But as we maximize this up and we see what's going on, we can see the predictions of what's coming in and when. So how did I get to this state? Well, when you're creating your cash flow, you can determine how it's sort of built. There's one here which is consider cash flow payment terms. So ordinarily, when we're looking at due dates on invoices and such, it's going to pick up the terms on the customer and vendor records. But you well know that you might be giving a datum 30 days on their invoices, but the reality of the situation is they generally take a little longer than that. So the minute they've got 1 month and 8 days over here, but I can change the cash flow payment terms codes over here and say, well, they take much longer than that and they take 60 days. So all of the invoices on here will be pushed out to 60 days due for this individual customer. And again, I can do that differently on each customer and differently on each vendor as well if I need to. But coming back to my cash flow, I can come into process and I can come into cash flow worksheet, and I can process through here and suggest the worksheet lines. So this is going to essentially recalculate everything and bring in whatever I need to bring in, my liquid funds, my receivables, my sales forecasts. Again, you can choose what to include and what not to include in each individual forecast. I can group by individual types as well. I can select OK, and this is where it builds this in. And I can see what the suggestions are. If I know individual transactions are going to be coming in on different times, so we know that one's going to be pushed out for a particular reason, I can push that out or pull that in. I can change individual dates. I can tailor this. I can get rid of lines, whatever I need to do. But once I'm happy, I can process and register, and then that becomes the forecast for that point in time. It could all be done essentially sort of manually in that fashion, or I can come into my cash flow setup and I can basically determine where it's pulling this information from, but then also set a frequency for recalculation of the cash flow, or I can also connect this into the Azure AI and have the artificial intelligence take over as well, and for it to run the cash flow to get slightly better accuracy on the cash flow forecasting. But obviously with all AIs, it's going to need to build up over a period of time to get its history to be able to get its predictions more accurate. So there's a brief introduction to the cash flow within Business Central.